it gets hot.
Jahaziel, it's hot in here.
Oh yeah, and I got lights as well. So it's quite intense. Okay, so I think we are going live. And I got lights as well. Okay, I think we're live on YouTube. Let's make sure it's okay with that. Make sure I can pull it up on my. Thank you, Kaisha, for putting that down. If you can actually put the actual channel link in there as well, that would really help. Thank you. Is it in the description box?
I'm putting a t-shirt. It's too hot in this house.
Sorry?
So I'm just gonna put on a t-shirt. It's too hot.
Oh yeah. Make sure that the link is there. Just bear with me, guys. No, that's not what I wanted. Let me put it in manually. Make sure the link is there for you guys. My phone's acting slow at the moment. Thank you, Kaisha. Oh, no, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so gonna copy the link over now, guys. So make sure you're on the YouTube. Oh, okay, so it's not making me select all of it. Hold on, guys. Technology again. Bear with me. We'll make sure all of this intro bit is edited out at the beginning as well. Right, so the link should be in the comment section of the YouTube. So once we finish the interview, you guys can actually come into the conversation, and then we can allow you to come up on camera or come up on as a audio, and you can actually ask your questions directly to Jahaziel. So hi, Jahaziel. Welcome to my platform, Soul Reconnection. What's going on? What's
happening? As I said, I'm loving the cosmic background, yeah.
Yeah, man, that's how we do it around here. All day, every day. So yeah, like this is Jahaziel. I've known Jahaziel for a good 2 years now. We actually do have family relations somewhere. But I've known him from the church, from the background of the church, and also sung with you sometimes as well for some of your things. I'm actually going to mention the last time that we actually
you remember, yeah?
Because I think that's quite interesting, because that was quite a significant part of both of our journeys. We didn't even know that we were both kind of going through a transition, but we managed to just meet on that day, and I think that was quite dope in itself. But I'll just allow you to kind of introduce yourself a little bit, introduce your background. You can kind of do a general thing, and then we can kind of go through some of the questions that I kind of set out for you.
Background, I mean, Yeah, I mean, I was a Christian rapper for like, well, I was a Christian for about 20 years and signed artist for about, I guess altogether probably about 8 to 10 years. Put out a couple of albums, toured a lot, spent a lot of time evangelizing. I worked for a church. I was part of a missionary organization. So yeah, you know, my life was given to quote unquote ministry. And I guess what we're going to discuss is, you know, I came to a point where I started to think for myself and had a lot of questions surrounding the religion of Christianity, the history of Christianity, some of the theology, the God of the Bible, how the Bible was put together, and all sorts of things like that that made me resign from taking a stance of saying that I would define myself as a Christian. I couldn't do that with a clear conscience. And so I stepped away. And in doing so, you know, I guess face the consequence of that. You know what I'm saying? Socially, financially, and yeah, you know, dealing with the backlash of different responses to that. So that's like 4 years ago now, and some of that I'm way past, and some of that I'm still dealing with. Effects that it's had on, you know, friends, family, and career path and stuff like this, you know, just all natural kind of repercussions, but I have no regrets whatsoever. And just here to have a chat. I'm just here to have a chat. You know what I'm saying? I don't have no agenda to be like, you know, I want to prove anything to anybody or disprove anything to anybody. I'm just here to kind of answer questions, share my experience, share my thoughts, and see where that goes.
Yeah, no, I think it was important to do this interview with yourself because there's not many interviews that you've done that I felt that you didn't have to defend yourself or defend why you actually taken this step in itself.
Exactly.
So even how some of the interviews would be titled, it would be still quite biased.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a couple interviews. Sorry, I'm just plugging my charger in. It's all over the place. I had a couple interviews. There we go. That I did on Christian platforms. Well, one of them was on BBC, actually, BBC Radio. And man, they edited the hell out of my discussion to the point it was almost unrecognizable what I was saying to the final edit. You know what I'm saying? Because I guess, you know, they although it wasn't necessarily a religious radio show, I think some of the stuff I was saying was maybe too controversial for them.
Yeah.
So they edited it really, and I regretted doing it after that. I was like, man, if I'm going to do it, it's got to be on a, you know, if I'm going to have these type of discussions, it's got to be with open-minded people who don't have a corner to defend. Do you know what I'm saying? They're just open to discussion and, you know, sharing thoughts and sharing ideas. Simple.
Yeah, definitely. Because I remember that interview, and I remember thinking, when is Jahaziel going to speak? Like, you know, like, and actually getting your perspective of what I know your perspective would be. So I know how I myself have been on the BBC, so I know how biased they can be in terms of editing and stuff like that. But, you know, just grateful that I can actually create a platform to be able to have those types of open-minded discussions as it is. So I'm going to kick it off. And I'm just going to ask you, like, what was your exposure to Christianity like? What was your, like, becoming a Christian and becoming saved and, like, becoming Jahaziel, the Jahaziel that everyone knows now or knew then?
All right, so I became a Christian in my late teens. As in, a friend of mine, he had made the decision to become a Christian, and it seemed to have like a positive affecting his life. He was like, used to take drugs and stuff, and then he stopped doing that. And yeah, just seemed to be a bit more positive in a lot of ways. And I was at a position where I felt like my life was kind of going in a direction I didn't want it to go in. I felt like I had little control in stopping that. So I was finding myself ending up in situations where things I said I'd never do, I found myself doing them. You know what I'm saying? It was getting more and more serious. So I won't even go into all that. But so when he invited me to church, I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought, now, you know what? Maybe I need to give this church thing a try. So I went and I made a decision on that day that I was going to, you know, give this Christian thing a go. And I remember the first day that I went, like I went up to the front as you do. And then afterwards, I felt like I'd made it. For me, that was quite significant going up to the front. You know what I'm saying? It was like I stepped out my seat. It was quite bold for me to do that because I never planned to do nothing like that when I went. And I remember a guy came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, you know, you've got to get baptized now." And I was like, "Okay, well, let me think about it." And he said, "Nah, because what if you know, go outside and you get run over by a bus?" Saying like it's gonna be too late to get baptized then. And I was like, yeah, what's your point? And he was like, well, you know, if you're not baptized or blah blah blah, you know, you go to hell, whatever. So from the very gate, this kind of threatening behavior, you know, kind of subtly, you know, was put in, and it, you know, a large part of what kept me in the belief or the faith of Christianity was this kind of shotgun pointed at my head most of the time, like believe or else. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely. No, I can definitely resonate with that. And I don't know if your kind of exposure to church was from like a more old school perspective or a more newer, gentler perspective, but
Both.
I just know that. Sorry?
Both. Well, originally it was the old school, but then I got involved with a lot of different, because that was never going to work for me. So I moved to a much more liberal church. So I'd seen over the 20 years I've been a Christian, I've seen church from a lot of different perspectives. Church in England, Pentecostal, Baptist, Reformed, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of different kind of contexts of Christianity I've been exposed to.
Definitely. I'd just like you to kind of speak a bit more about your artistry, just you as how you came Jahaziel, like in itself. Like, what was that journey like for you?
Well, I was rapping before I went to the church, but not like seriously. I was just on it a little bit. And to be fair, like I lacked a lot of confidence in doing it. Like I could do it, but I didn't think I was very good. But when I went to church, it was like I had a bunch of people saying, yeah, you're really good, which encouraged me. And, you know, any environment that you're around where people are encouraging and supporting you, you know, it's going to be good for you and build your confidence. So although originally the church dancing, actually the pastor wasn't happy about this whole rapping thing. That wasn't, you know what I'm saying? He was that old school, was like rapping and church don't go together. Yeah. And so a lot of my friends that I was there with, they used to rap as well, kind of all stopped rapping. And I couldn't help but translate what I was learning and what I was thinking into rhymes. And so that's what I did. And I remember one week I must have took a gig, me and a couple other guys, Michelle, Makara, we did a gig. And it was in the Voice newspaper. And I remember we came into church on Sunday and the pastor was like, I need to talk to you. So we went back to talk to him. He's got like the paper spread out with our pictures on the newspaper. He's like, well, what's this? What is this? But yeah, again, you know, obviously we didn't stay there much longer because that was never really going to work for us.
It's
but
interesting.
Yeah, that just led on to more opportunities to rap, and the more opportunities came, was the more my name kind of, and then people approached me for, you know, management, and then that turned to recording an album, to doing tours, and so on and so forth.
Okay, that's dope. You mentioned something with regards to what did you just mention? I was just about to say something on it. I can't remember. It will probably come back to me at some point. But yeah, like you became a massive pillar of the church in terms of bringing a lot of young people off of the streets and into the church. You was a very kind of big figure in terms of that, and I guess that's why you were so valued to the church.
Absolutely. I was a recruiter. You know what I'm saying? And you know, I'm the kind of person, you know, if I give myself to something at 100, I go 110%, you know what I'm saying? And so the church where I was in at the time, there wasn't this movement of Christian hip hop like there is now, you know what I'm saying? It was a very underground, very kind of not even that well embraced by the church generally. Do you know what I'm saying? So my only intention in doing it was nothing to do with getting on or making money, because there wasn't no money to make. There wasn't no scene to get on in. It was just about reaching the people that I connected with previously, do you know what I'm saying, through a means that I thought we could communicate, which was through music. That's what I could do, you know what I'm saying? That was my only intention in doing it. And it, you know, it later on that became a business and whatever, and now it's, you know, a much different kettle of fish than it was when I was doing it, but that was why I was doing it.
Okay, and then you also was quite in terms of there was a few of you guys that was known as being like the apologetics or the apologetic kind of community of those that was able to defend the faith of Christianity, especially, and it was quite admirable coming from especially for as being like coming from your background, like, you know, it's still quite rough to the church, which was, I guess that was a bit of a paradox in itself, because I didn't know whether to really accept you, because you was basically like, there was no definition between you and the world. So they'll just see you as like, you know, behaving like the world, and you're not behaving like how the church is supposed to behave, which is why they didn't accept rap or anything. But I just find that very interesting, just that process in itself. So like you was doing like a lot of debates and in that kind of arena. So if you can just kind of go into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like if you're gonna believe in the Bible, see, one of the problems was when I first was given the Bible, I was told before I'd ever read it that I should believe that this is the inerrant word of God. And that's what most Christians are taught. You know what I'm saying? You're taught that it is the inerrant word of God before you've read it. So that's not based on your own assessment, your own evaluation. It's not like you've read it, studied it, looked at the history of it, checked the inconsistencies, blah, 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 and come to the conclusion that this is inerrant. You've bought into the concept that it's inerrant before you've ever read it. Do you know what I'm saying? In fact, most Christians have never actually even read the Bible in its entirety. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I took it upon myself to study it to that degree and to ask the questions about, you know, the history of it and how it was canonized, Council of Nicaea, books that were taken out, translational errors, discrepancies, inconsistencies, contradictions, so on and so forth. Believing that, well, okay, when I scrutinize it, it's going to come up that, you know, the Bible is proven to be true. But on the contrary, I found the more I studied and looked at the histories, the more I questioned its validity. I could definitely see some principles in there that were healthy and sound, but a lot of superstition, a lot of stuff that I found to be immoral, a lot of things that I found to be inconsistent, unbelievable, and so on. And you know, my main issue is that there was just very little evidence to support a lot of its claims. You know what I'm saying? So to expect someone to have to believe something that you cannot prove is unreasonable. It's unreasonable. You know what I'm saying? I could ask you to believe something if I said to you, Nams, you know, lend me £20, I'll give it back to you Saturday, and I'll ask you to believe that. But if I cannot guarantee you, if I cannot prove that, you know, I'm trustworthy, I cannot prove I'm consistent, I cannot, you know, and there's no historical evidence, scientific evidence to back a lot of the claims that the Bible makes, then it's like, how can you expect someone to say you have to believe this or else you'll be punished? I think that's really unreasonable.
And if you don't, it's your lack of faith.
Well, that's the get out clause for pretty much everything.
And I think that's where the abuse comes in, because it's you're almost trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. But by you going through that process, you're now being demonized because you're not encouraged to question. And when it's that whole fear-based teaching all over again. There's a term called poisonous pedagogy, and it's these where everything is like very fear-based, and it's like this is, it also becomes a foundation for even how we parent our children, because we like to use certain scriptures like spare not the rod, and things like that, to be able to justify violence towards our children, which we're supposed to love and care for, which you're supposed to nurture for, but you're not. You're actually treating them as like a battering ram, and Absolutely. The Bible almost justifies that type of behavior.
Absolutely. Well, it's totally down to interpretation. You know, the when the Bible says, you know, wives, submit to your husband. Now, what you define as submit and what I define as submit could be totally different. You know what I'm saying? The man who beats his wife says, well, she's submitting. Submission is like a word used in wrestling when you get someone to tap out. You know what I'm saying? It's exercising your strength and power over somebody to make them submit. Do you know what I'm saying? I find things like that just very unhealthy and archaic. As far as, you know, how to manage relationships, how to, you know, the spare not the rod thing. I think there's a reason why, you know, we've bought into that type of teaching so much, and that's because, you know, we've been conditioned to violence through slavery. Do you know what I'm saying? It's normalized behavior to us for violence. Do you know what I'm saying? So, you know, my dad would tell me that how when he was younger, his dad tied him around a tree and beat him. Do you know what I mean? Who does that? Child abuse, we'd call that nowadays. But the further back you go to our generations, is the more barbaric you'll see the punishment type of treatment. So for us to buy a story that there's a God who will effectively beat you if you don't worship him, or beat you if you don't love him, or beat you if you disobey him, we'll buy that because we've been conditioned to violence already. But as we've got to a point now where we're more moral in our thinking and less violent, we like, hang on, this is a really unhealthy way, you know what I'm saying, to relate. That if there was a heavenly father, why would he drown people because he doesn't like them or because they don't obey him? Or why would he tell the Israelites to kill these other people just because they don't worship the same God that they worship? Like, you know,
and I think it's quite traumatic as well, because one of the things that the church uses is this this archetype of Father God, and especially those who don't have a direct connection to their biological father, that's almost like an emotional hook that is brought on. So when you actually kind of okay, sorry. I'm hoping that that gets cut off really quickly. I live on a main road, guys. So you have to bear with me. What's going on? Okay, is that really loud? Okay, good. It's gone
But I
now.
think so. Yeah.
All right, cool.
The emotional hook you saying about the Father God thing. That's a good point, man.
Right. So especially with myself, like that was a massive hook for me, like being able to like be like, yeah, God is my Father. I don't need anyone else because I've got God the Father. And I think that is really it's quite sad actually, because the damage that happens to those that, especially that goes for a transition out of Christianity, I think that is also a source of a lot of the anger that comes out in terms of how they express themselves, for the anger of what they've been taught all this time. And I think it's important to really address the different stages of what happens in a trend, because not everyone, and I want to put this on the record as well, not everyone has the same type of transitional journey. And I think I remember one time when especially after we both transitioned and we met back up for the first time after that was a big massive indicator to me, because I actually thought, okay, like he's gone on this journey, so there's certain things that he may have come across that, you know, that I'm now coming across, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I may only have touched the surface on that, and actually expected you to have been a bit more like in depth in that. But it's like, not everyone's got their own journey that they take. Everyone has different levels of information that they hold in certain areas, and I think that was really important for me to see that in itself, and just value where I was at in my own personal journey. And not have to, because this is something that I see a lot, especially with people that have left church, and they come to me and they're like, oh, well, I'm not where you are. No, but you are where you are, and where you are is very valid in itself, and there's a lot to be experienced in that place. So what would you say to that?
Absolutely. Well, accepting yourself is just a massive thing. I think that was a real that was a big kind of thing for me, is that I was taught, you know, the stuff of that, you know, your heart is deceitfully wicked above all things, you're born in sin, shaping in iniquity, and all this kind of stuff. But kind of, sorry, I should have really set this thing up. One second. There we go. All right. Yeah. Your heart's deceitfully wicked, born in sin, shaping in iniquity, and these type of things that really leave you with quite a low self-esteem. They ultimately teach that you are nothing without this God. Mm-hmm. You can do nothing without this God. You are a wretch. Mm-hmm. You know, it was the amazing grace that saved a wretch like me. It's like, have this really
white as snow.
Yeah, like, and without this God, you're filthy, you're hellbound, you're just a piece of shit, basically. Mm-hmm. And so having that kind of perspective, it was really liberating for me to get to a point of accepting my higher and lower self, you know what I'm saying? Accepting my perfection within my imperfections, if you want, you know what I'm saying? That I am a work in process, and I am enough as I am, you know what I'm saying? And getting to that point was really liberating for me, because I didn't need saving. Do you know what I'm saying? I didn't need saving anymore. I wasn't I didn't have this view of myself that, you know, oh, I need a hand from the sky to come and help me. It's like I was empowered to know that I have the power of, you know, good and evil. You know, are as much as, you know, we attribute them to God and the devil, and that's not even surprising that the words are so similar: good, God, evil. You know, they're characteristics that dwell within me. You know what I'm saying? God and the devil is within me, and I therefore am responsible for, you know, whatever good I produce in my life or whatever bad I produce. You know what I'm saying? I take responsibility for that. And yeah, just getting to that point where I could take responsibility and not have to blame my, you know, negatives on some devil out in the sky, or credit my successes on some God in the sky, but within myself. That was really, really liberating for me. And so yeah, I don't know if it answers your question really, but yeah, just you know, a knowledge of self, rather than, you know, belief in beings that control your life and your destiny is very empowering to take the reins of your life. You know, people say Jesus take the wheel. Like, how about you take the wheel of your life? You know what I mean? And you are the captain of your own ship, your own soul. It's very empowering.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about when you, so I guess your catalyst was just being able to, of like going through your transition, was being able to kind of identify the God in the Bible through your own eyes, as opposed to how people were presenting him to be, and being able to decode and unwrap that for yourself. Like, now, in going through that process, how did you go through that, in terms of approaching maybe your pastor? Like, what was the reactions? How did people, because I know that was very crazy.
Yeah,
became international news.
Yeah, I think I already got to a point where I had stopped. You see, the way the system's set up so that if you're a type of person that, you know, you respect titles and you do things by the system, it's set up in such a way that you can never really have your own opinion, your own journey. Do you know what I'm saying? There's this whole pastoring thing is a way of people guiding you into what they believe. Do you know what I'm saying? Because apparently it's dangerous for you to think for yourself and to make decisions for yourself. And I got to a point where I no longer cared for titles. I'd met pastors and bishops and so on from, you know, all over the world, and I found by and large they were no different, no more wiser, no more special, no more gifted than me or anyone else. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I stopped buying into titles. I stopped buying into the title Christian by that time. I decided I don't see why I should need to define myself as a Christian. Why do I need that branding? Jesus was not a Christian. The disciples, you know, never called themselves Christians. Like, where
Christian.
Right, but where is this obligation that you have to define yourself that way? Do you know what I'm saying? Why can't I just be a human? So I'd already got to that point where I stopped really carrying those titles. And so when I started to question the character of the Bible God, I was thinking for myself. I knew if I discussed it with certain people, they might have the power to convince me to see it their way. But I didn't want to see it their way. I wanted to read it and decide for myself what I make of it. So when I would read verses where, like, you know, with the Passover, the God of the Bible kills the firstborn child of every Egyptian household, I looked at that and I said, is that a loving father? Is that a God that you would worship? A God that kills the firstborn child of every Egyptian household? And I looked at it and I thought, that's disgusting. That's abhorrent. It's evil. And if someone said that Satan did that, they'd say, yeah, he's disgusting. But because a book says that the God of the Bible did it, we're supposed to celebrate it and say this is a good thing. And I said, no, I'm not going to keep buying into what people tell me. That to me is disgusting. And I don't care for the context. People say, oh, but context. Like, there's no context for killing children that is appropriate. There's no context for killing children. I should say, well, yeah, okay, you've got a good point there. That child did deserve to be slaughtered. Do you know what I'm saying? It's disgusting. It's disgusting, and it's just a mind control why people cannot see that and won't allow themselves to see that it's disgusting, because they've already bought into this idea that everything that this God of the Bible does is good. I don't care if it looks evil. I don't care if it sounds evil, if it feels it. It's good. And I've decided that, so period, it's done. And that's a really sad way of living, I think. But if that's what someone chooses to do, fine. But I couldn't do that. If I'm going to worship this God. So.
No, it's interesting that you mentioned initially where you was talking about how people always want to come and assist you on that journey on finding the truth.
Yeah.
And I remember that was something that was very prominent for me, because when I had spoken out and said, actually, I'm not really resonating with this anymore, it was like, you need a leader, you need this, you need that. And I was like, no, I don't want a leader specifically to avoid the same situation that I'm in right now. Let me go and discover the truth for myself. If the truth be true, we'll find it.
Come on.
But why are you so afraid for me to actually go on that journey by
right.
myself?
Absolutely.
I remember.
Sorry.
No, I remember one of the things that always used to be said is, don't get too lost in theology because you won't be able to find your balance. No, you're trying to actually still make it make sense in something that is never going to make sense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
don't think too much for yourself. That's the bottom. Don't think too much for yourself. It's dangerous. Even the concept of the Bible and people governing their whole entire life by the Bible, you're still following the writings and experiences of other people and validating and their experience over your own. Like, write your own book, write your own experience. What does the infinite, if you want to call it God, the universe, whatever, what does it say to you? What have you learned? Like, share that. Like, the people who wrote the Bible never had a Bible.
That's important to know.
Yeah, like this idea that you cannot communicate with with nature or the universe or God, but through the Bible, is ridiculous. The Bible is a late introduction into human history. What were we doing for eons before the Bible was written? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's ridiculous. So this whole system, religion is a man-made system that doesn't even date back very far historically. Do you know what I'm saying? That says, if you want to get access to the divine, you have to go through this system. And what I learned as well through traveling was a really liberating thing for me as well, touring, because I realized that I was introduced to Christianity primarily because of my location. That the predominant religion of that area where I'm from, you know what I mean, in the West. If I was born in China, I would have probably been introduced to Zennism or Taoism. You know what I'm saying? If I was born in India, it would have been Hinduism or Sikhism. If I was born in Iraq, it would have been Islam. Do you know what I'm saying? Depending on where you're born is the religion that's predominant in that area that says you have to come through us to get to the divine. But the thing that I found most disturbing was when I toured Africa, that as much as I just named all those other areas, you know, I went to Pakistan and a lot of places where I saw, the religions that represented the ethnicity of the people. You know what I'm saying? But I went to Africa and saw like nothing indigenous. You know what I'm saying? The people, by and large, where I was going, were bought into a European concept of religion. Like, African spirituality to Africans was demonized. Like, they were more distant from African spirituality in Africa than we are here. They're singing all hill songs. The pastor's there in a suit and tie, hot till it can't hot. Do you know what I'm saying? Boiling hot, and he's there with his suit and tie done. I'm like, taught you to dress like this? Who taught you to sing like this? Like, where is your African spirituality that predates these religions? you know what I'm saying?
Even mentioning that how Africanness got stripped out of the church with this whole Hillsong movement, because it now became a thing where if you do more songs like that have calypso beat or an Afro beat, then you're in your flesh, and that's your culture. So you would class the sound of God being this westernized perspective of music that, you know, it as much as it's creative, it's only creative because we've sold to it. You know, but it won't allow us to actually really explore our cultural side of who, like, when you become a Christian, you forget your culture. You're now Jewish, and you see like this now culture of where you have to get your talit, you have to get follow all the Jewish feasts and stuff like that. This is for more like churches that are trying to be a bit more theologically based, but you throw away your culture and you take up a Jewish culture where you have no connection to Jews, and they don't even have any connection to you either. They don't want to have a connection.
Facts. We totally buy into a Jewish narrative with Christianity. And yeah, it you know, that I remember getting to that point where like someone was saying to me, oh, you know, to understand the Bible, you need to read it in its earliest language. So I'm like, okay. So I'm looking at the early writings and it's Hebrew and Greek. And I'm like, so if Africa, you know, we existed for you know, hundreds of thousands of years prior to before Hebrew and Greek was even invented. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, why is the earliest text not in an African dialect? Do you know what I'm saying? Where's our text? And so that's when I started to look back further than the earliest Bible text to things like the hieroglyphs and the, you know, Sumerian texts and things like that like bear striking resemblance. You know, you read things like the 48 laws of Ma'at, and you compare that to the 10 commandments, which obviously came way later. Like, hang on, you guys borrowed a whole lot of the concepts that you hold to from previous earlier civilizations, do you know what I'm saying, of African origin, but give no credit to those systems. So yeah, so I think yeah, this whole buying into Judaism thing is like, I mean, as I said, there might be some principles in there that are cool, but like, there's nothing wrong with going back and looking back to, you know, to African sources, you know, of spirituality, because hang on, you know, these African societies basically built civilization as we know it. Everything, and electricity, architecture, art, you name it, science, astrology, all came from Africa. So if they got it right on all of these things about civilizations, what makes you think they didn't get it right about spirituality? And then you look into their concepts of spirituality and you see that, you know, there are principles that seem to be held in all of these religions, that they've taken parts and elements of, you know, African spirituality. And to simply put, African spirituality really points towards nature. Do you know what I'm saying? This idea of like beings, gods, like literal beings, is a European misunderstanding of African spirituality. African spirituality points more towards nature and gives, what's the word when they give like human characteristics, like they say the man on the moon? Is it like anthropomorphism, I think?
Oh yeah.
You know, we had gods, but those gods were literally just symbolic. Do you know what I'm saying? For elements of nature.
It's all within ourselves. Like, for example, if you look into and it's all of the deities, not just African, the Asian, the Hindu, the Mayan, like all different deities, like every deity is based on the same archetypal energies, which is why you'll see the same story repeating itself out, because it's based on universal laws and universal principles. So if you look at the deity Ganesha, it looks like a train, like it has the elephant with the trunk. That's what your brain looks like. So the picture of Ganesha is just a replication of your brain. The archetype of Ganesha is the energy of removing obstacles and blockages and creating abundance and prosperity. You create that in your mind. Your mind has the power to be able to do that. So I think it's important to even put that in place, because what I'm finding is that a lot of people use this. There has been people that have transitioned from Christianity into wherever we are. I don't like to put a label on it, because I don't like the word woke or even the conscious community or any of that, because everyone is different and no one believes the same thing. But I find that the religious mindset can be transferred over, where, you know, you're calling Jesus, 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 and then you're calling out to all these different archetypal deities, which is it doesn't make a difference. You leave in Christianity if you don't recognize the power that you have within yourself. These things were just supposed to be a mirror. I think one of the most empowering things for me that kind of made it click in my head is looking at the image of God. Is the image of God a hierarchy, or is it just a direct reflection? I had to allow myself to go through those questions, because I kept seeing something as higher for myself or external for myself, as opposed to a part of myself. And I think that's where the problem is. And when you was bringing up things to do with having a sense of low self-worth, I realized that I learned a lot of myself, my low self-esteem from church, from constantly having to reaffirm that I am nothing, I am never going to be anything without God, you know. And even though I had this desire and this yearning, because I'm like you, if I'm doing something, I'm doing it 100. I'm not doing it half-heartedly. I was exactly the same when I was a Christian. I'm exactly the same now. So like, I need to know, what is it that I'm fully investing myself in? Because if I don't, and I've just picked up something else, I'm just going to be doing the same thing all over again. So I think that's important, because there's this other thing where, you know, and everyone has the choice to be able to continually go through different filters in their own journey unapologetically. But I think one of the things that I find quite disrespectful that I find from Christians is that they're always expecting you to go back. And it's like, it's quite frustrating, because at the end of the day, you're in a place where you're like, something's clicked, okay? Like, I've understood that there's something a bit deeper to this. It's like, it's like, that's your journey, but it's also accepting that there's a whole perspective to this. So if you are in Christianity and you're finding it works for you, cool. I'm not here to change your mind. You can do that till the wheels fall off if you feel like it's working. But fact of the matter is giving someone the opportunity to go on their own journey, to be like, actually, this isn't working for me, and this is something that I find that works, and I feel more connected to this. And there's nothing, as yes, you may not have all the answers or anything together now, but you know that where you currently are is where you're supposed to be. So
it's like it's the kind of a group dynamic, isn't it? When you get a group and they're kind of all bound by the same fear, then when you step out and you decide to take your own journey, it's like there'll always be those within that group who'll be like, what are you doing? Like, you need to get back in the group. You need to come back to the group. It's scary out there. Bad things can happen. Do you understand? You need to be a part. Because they're bound in fear, and that's what they live by. And so they're obviously going to transmit that to you, because they see you've got the courage to step out and do something for yourself, and they're not able to do that. And so some of them will actually even hate you for having the boldness to do that. That's what I'm saying. But, you know, I'm grateful for the few people that have, you know, supported enough to say, whether I agree with you or not, you know what, do you, like follow your conscience, follow your guide, you know what I'm saying, and make decisions that you feel are right for you. And you know, if they're wrong, you learn. If they're right and positive, you'll grow. Like either way, it's your life to experience. And there's few people that I've found that response with. Most of the people from the religion were more in that fear mentality and were like very distant to my decisions. You know what I'm saying?
But some of them do know, and I remember you even mentioning you having certain conversations with certain pastors, and you know, like you being able to present that information to them, and then being like, yeah, but what do you expect me to do? Do you know what I mean? And it's like,
yeah, I sat with a pastor one time. I had a meeting. I won't say his name, but we had a meeting, and he was asking me some questions, and I was asking him some questions, and we, you know, it's a guy that I've known for a while, good friends as well, and we agreed on so much. And so I think I brought up the subjects about tithing and saying that, you know, why I didn't believe that was a New Testament doctrine. And you know, if you're to follow the law that instituted that, there are many other laws that you ignore. You know what I'm saying? You don't follow. Why do you just choose that one? And his line was like, well, it pays the bills. If you give people the freedom to choose whether they'll give the money or not, they might not give the money. So we give them an ultimatum that says, you know, if you give, you'll be blessed. And if you don't, you'll be cursed. And it's just, again, it's another threat. It's another fear-based threat to control people. And that's what they do. That's what the business is about.
It's emotional abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, it is abuse, but then it's not as well, because the people who give, they give voluntarily. You know what I'm saying?
They do, but there's a lot of people in church that are very vulnerable, because a lot of people have come to church broken. They're coming expecting that the church is supposed to be some kind of hospital, and it's like, you know.
I hear you, but truth be told, like the vulnerable are always going to be abused. Do you know what I'm saying? If you are going to allow yourself and make yourself to be vulnerable, you're food for someone. Someone is going to see you as an opportunity to say, okay, you don't know yourself, so I can make money off that. That's what advertisers do all the time. You know what I'm saying? They tell you what you want to buy. Oh, you need this in your life. Oh, you need that. If you don't know yourself, you don't know what you need, you'll always buy into what someone else says. It's like, you can't watch every advert and everything they say, okay, yeah, I need that. At some point, you have to stop and say, I don't care what they're telling me or what they're selling me. I'm going to decide for myself what I do, what I don't, what I believe, what I don't believe, what I will do. You have to take that responsibility for yourself. You can't put that into someone else's hands and not expect to be taken advantage of. It's just naive, and it's silly. And we can't keep doing it and then blaming the leaders and saying, oh yeah, but the church this, the church that. Like, more fool you. I mean, some of them, Nams, I've seen some of these guys that you can see from a million miles off. This whole thing is a farce. It's almost comedic. Do you know what I'm saying? But then you'd think that anyone would look at that and think this is ridiculous. But check the size of their church. Check the car that he drives. Check how much money they're bringing in. Like, people buy into it. I was in a bank one time. I was in a bank, and the lady in front of me, she gave a check to the woman in the bank, and the woman at the bank, she looks at the check and she looks up at the woman and she looks down and she's like, "Are you serious?" And the woman said, "What do you mean? It's a check to my pastor." And the woman at the bank, she was like, "Pastor Dollar, like, you're going to give money to someone called Pastor Dollar." Now, obviously, she's clocked Pastor Dollar. But the other woman, she's bought into this whole image thing. So for her, it's not that simple. And I think sometimes it takes a step out. You've got to step away from the church to actually really look at it and evaluate what it really is. If you're in it, sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. So what's really common sense and like, duh, that's obvious, you wouldn't notice because you've been in it for so long. Do you know what I'm saying? It takes fresh eyes sometimes to, someone that's not in it to kind of look from a distance and say, that's like fraud. That's so obviously fraud. Do you know what I'm saying? And ask simple questions. I mean, I remember one time I was at a meeting. It was a celebrity friend of mine. Again, I won't say his name, but he had like this woman from America doing this kind of presentation, Christian presentation, and he had a lot of his kind of celebrity mates there or whatever. And halfway through her talk, someone in the front put their hand up and said, "What did you mean by blah, blah, blah?" and repeated what the woman said. At that point, I realized I'd been listening for the last half an hour and I understand hardly anything she said. But I was so trained, because I'm used to church, to not put up my hand and say, "What are you talking about? I don't understand." Because the general setup on a Sunday is very much about monologue. It's not about dialogue. So you sit there and you are spoken to. And from you're a child in Sunday school, you might nudge your mum and say, "What? I don't understand you." Shh, shh. That's what we do here. We shush, they speak, we listen. We just open our mouths and swallow whatever they feed us. But then even if you weigh that up with what the example you see in the Bible of Jesus is, again, a contradiction, because 99% of his teachings were not sermons, were not monologues. They were dialogue. They were answers to questions, which means questions is what it's all about. Do you know what I'm saying? They were questions, and they weren't in a church either. There was questions on the street, in conversation with normal people. So this whole church setup we've got is very foreign to what you see in the Bible, and what we saw, what we read of Jesus is very foreign.
I hear that. I wanted to ask you a question, and before I do, this is sending out a message to everyone else who's on this live stream. If you would like to jump in on the question and answer, jump in now, so that by the time we're ready to go into the questions and answers, you guys are already there. So you should be able to see the link at the top. If not, I'll post it back again now. And you just click that link and you can join in the conversation, and you can ask Jahaziel some questions. But one of the questions I wanted to really highlight with you is, what was the cost of you going on this journey? Like, what was the reality of the cost?
All right, so I was having these kind of questions and things going around in my head, but I kept quiet about it. I kept very quiet about it. And a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who's another rapper, he went by the name of True to the Name, my boy Christian Gabriel. He kind of made the transition out of Christianity, and he had this whole movement called Banned from Church. He was with the Potter's House movement, and quite an extreme experience really with them. But like was very vocal about his stepping out and why he was stepping out, whatever. Now, he was close to me, but even though he's my brethren, I still didn't even share a lot of my thoughts with him, because I didn't want my decision to be based off of what my friend was doing. Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I listened to him, but I was still kind of wouldn't really share that much of what I was thinking. I would use him almost like devil's advocate, and I'd ask him questions. Yeah, but the kind of arguments I knew that would be posed to me, I was posing to him, if you want. And so that's kind of where it started. And then when I got to the point where it was like, nah, you know what, I can't keep doing this, because I was part of the leadership of a church where I was running a cell group, doing Sunday schools, preaching occasionally, and doing all these kind of things. And I was sharing stuff that I wasn't even convinced of myself, or disagreed with, not even just didn't believe, disagreed with. You know what I'm saying? It was like, I didn't resonate with this stuff. And, you know, there were occasions when I brought people to church because we did a lot of outreach work, young people from the estate, and they'd ask me questions about what's going on in the church. And why does the vicar dress like that? And why, what does this mean? And why do people do? And I just be like, I ain't got a clue, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, it don't make no sense to me neither. But this is how church is. You know what I'm saying? Unfortunately. And I got to a point I was like, no, I can't keep doing this. So I took a step back. Now, originally, my step back was more so just a personal thing. I wanted to say, look, I'm not saying I don't believe none of it. I'm just saying there's stuff that I don't, and I just want to resign from those elements. But like believing that Jesus was literal, it would seem that was like a fundamental that you know, for me to continue working at the church and to be a part of the leadership, I had to believe it. This was literal. I'd be like, but you can't evidence to me that it's literal. And I read of types of this Christ character that predate the Jesus story, that I see similarities that make me really wonder about the authenticity of this story, and so on and so on. But anyway, it got to the point where it was like, let me just step out. And so I did that. And to summarize really what the cost was for me was, firstly was like, the social impact was massive. In my majority of the people that I was in contact with and would consider friends, not like close friends, but people that, you know, were fans of me as far as a Christian rapper. The vast majority of feedback I got was very negative. You know, went from being, you know, like, you're lost, you're blind, hellbound, to like, you're cursed, the devil's taking control of your mind. God's not going to allow you to live to see 2017. I remember someone telling me, like, it just got to the point where, you know, people bringing up my daughter, and it was just terrible. It was really terrible. It was a horrible couple of years of continual, perpetual abuse, and, you know, verbal abuse, and people just wishing bad and negativity on me. That's what it felt like anyway. So that was one part of it. Obviously, I resigned from the role of working for the church, which meant, you know, I lost my job. The house that I was living in was tied into the job, so I lost that. The record label I had was of a Christian label, and we mutually agreed that it wasn't going to work, my stance with the label's beliefs or, you know, their fundamentals. So I lost the deal. So I stepped away from pretty much everything that had taken me the last, you know, 10 years to build in a matter of 2 weeks. Do you know what I mean? And it was like really, really starting from scratch. And then had issues, like, because I had given myself so much to the church for such a long time, I had largely neglected my family. So many family occasions that I opted out of because I had this mentality, which was like, you know, I'm a sinner, I'm a saint, you're a sinner type of thing. Not consciously wanting to judge them, but unconsciously, you know, having that type of judgment. I separated myself. And there's many verses from the Bible that, you know, you can use to justify that way of living, you know, like you said, not being worldly and separating yourself from the ungodly and all this kind of stuff. So I became very distant to my family. And then now it was like, okay, now I've made this decision to step away from that. I have to rebuild a lot of those bridges that I burnt in those relationships. You know, and I remember I went to my sister's wedding and I saw so many of my cousins with children that I'd never seen. Do you know what I'm saying? Children that were like, and big ass kids, you know what I'm saying? 10, 12, 13-year-olds that I'm like, wow, I don't even know their names. And that was a real painful experience, but necessary, you know what I'm saying? To like really just bring me back to earth. You know, so yeah, that's some of the costs. And then also, you know, career-wise, I'd been on the same trajectory for the last 20 years as far as working in the church. It was like, okay, what do I do now? So it's like I'm having to rethink, you know, my skill set and what I want to do with my life. And so in some ways it's very liberating, and it's a really good experience, but on some other ways it's very traumatic as well.
And I think that's really real to state, because, you know, if like going on this type of journey, it takes a lot of strength to like go through that. You lose, like I lost a lot of friends. I lost everything around me, you know, and like my stories on the from earlier in my channel with regards to me getting sections and stuff, that was also tied to me deciding to leave church and people deciding that I was crazy. So, you know, this is a very real thing. But I think what people also need to recognize is that you're still a human being. Like those who go on a transition, you're still human beings. They are not just because you now have the ability to rebuke and demonize and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't take away the fact that we are still human beings having real life experiences, having real life emotions, going through real life changes. And that's no different to someone who'll be a Christian. And I think one of the things that Christians, a lot of Christians kept coming back to me personally was that, especially when I went through a lot of the stuff 2 years ago, it was like, oh, this is because you're not Christian. I can guarantee you, if I was a Christian and certain things were still in that same position, I still would have gone through the same things. Like it's like you go on like you're not subject to any type of affliction once you become a Christian. Yeah, and I think that was the illusion that actually begun to make me angry with Christianity, because I remember I came into Christianity and I was sold this perspective that Jesus was gonna, like, you know, change everything, and it's almost like I'm going into this amazing heaven experience, and I only had that honeymoon experience for 1 week and I didn't have the tools to be able to carry me practically through the rest of those years that I was a Christian. And it's only when I left Christianity I was able to really understand stuff like emotional intelligence. And even having practical ways to deal with your mental health rather than just going and praying to Jesus. That's not going to do anything.
Yeah, so absolutely. I had much the same thing with my physical health. You know, I had a number of years as a Christian. I've been insulin-dependent diabetic for like 18 years, and I was suffering, like, to the point where I was really wondering how much longer I had to live, you know, as a Christian. And, you know, it was causing me so much stress. I was having several operations, in and out of the hospital all the time. And all I was given as far as the solution was, you know, just prayer. You know what I'm saying? Bible verses, you know, Jesus is going to do something, and, you know, in so many different ways. And when I stepped away from all of that and I kind of said, okay, what's within my power to do? You know, I took responsibility for myself. You know, I was able to make changes to, you know, my routine, my diet, meditation, going to hospital appointments, medication, and just being a lot more practical. Do you know what I'm saying? And, you know, subsequently my health, I'm still diabetic. I'm not cured, but I'm in a much better place mentally and physically than I was then. And, you know, I got to a point where I realized that if I continued going the way I was going, I would have died. And all they would have said is, well, he was faithful. You know, he believed until the end. You know what I'm saying?
And it's so sad. I've seen it happen so many times. I've been in churches where the pastor really should have actually a case against them, because they because of that same belief system of Jesus is going to save you, and don't actually go and do things practically to go and help your health, and they've actually passed away. And their thing was, well, at least I believed. And I'm like, how can you go through this journey just, not cognitive of what you're actually saying?
Yeah.
So I do think it's a really, really real thing. We do have one person in the queue for a question. It's Adam. I'm going to bring you in now. So I'm going to mute you and put you on video. If anyone else wants to be able to ask Jahaziel any questions, please come into the link now. I've sent the link into the live, and so definitely click it. Hi, Adam. You're on mute. You have to mute yourself.
Yeah. Sorry, that threw me off. Completely threw me off.
Sorry.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm good. I've been listening from the beginning. I was gonna say that your stories, or both your stories, are very reminiscent of stuff that I've heard myself through many years. I've felt that unfortunately in church, primarily Black church, we tend to fear questioning any kind of questions. But that being said, my question to you, Jahaziel, was I kind of understand obviously that your view on scripture, for example, has changed and over the years and stuff like that. I want to know, what's your particular viewpoint? Like, what if somebody said categorize your belief, what would that be?
I don't really deal with beliefs too tough. You know what I'm saying? I try to minimize beliefs. I more work with what can be evidenced and what resonates with me logically. So history, science, metaphysics. I work with generally what resonates with me more. So I don't really feel the need to fit into a category either. I've not like jumped out of one label into another, you know what I'm saying, or one system of belief into another system. I'm free to take truth from anywhere, you know what I'm saying, that I find resonates with me. So I can pretty much look into any religion or any astrology or any metaphysics or anything, and take which I find is healthy, which has some reason, logic, and is beneficial, really. So I don't know how you can categorize that, but I just try to take what I find positive, really, from wherever.
I think that's important, because Adam, like, I know that's like a frequent question that is often asked, and I would respond exactly the same. And I think there's this expectation that when you leave church, you automatically become something else. You've automatically like picked up another kind of belief system or another another hat. And I think what sense of this conversation was that there doesn't need to be a hat. Like, why does there need to be a hat? Like, you are the hat. And learn how to tap into like your own hat so that you understand what is it that resonates directly with you. Because as I mentioned earlier, me and Jahaziel, even though we've left church, we both don't have the same almost experience of our journeys. Like I've gone more deeper into like metaphysics and spirituality and all that kind of stuff. That's my journey. That may not be he may have aspects of it, but there's aspects of where we differ. And it doesn't mean to say we disagree with anyone or whatever, but it's just that's our paths. So I think it's important to understand that like, just as much as there's multiple different denominations within Christianity, there's multiple different denominations within humanity. And no one has to be the same. No one has to, because even myself, I've explored multiple different schools of thoughts, multiple different theologies, philosophies, religions, spiritual practices, but I would never put on any of those hats, because there's only certain things that I may be able to resonate with. and others that I may not. So I think it's understanding, or trying to really come out of that trap that I feel like Christianity created, in the fact that even though certain things may not resonate, you still have that cognitive dissonance to almost feel like you have to make it work. So I think that's why the removal of labels is quite important. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Is it all right if I drop one more question?
Yeah, no, but there's no one else in the chat at the moment, so we can go for like a few minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing is, I know you mentioned earlier, Jahaziel, about obviously the concept of good and evil, how it's similar to God and the devil, and you said how you would have the God and the devil within yourself, kind of thing. Is it fair to say that you don't believe in an external, like physical being of God, but that you believe the concept of God is an internal one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a concept. For me, God and devil is a concept.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they were literal beings, I would need some evidence of their existence, and unfortunately, I don't have that.
I think that one is important as well, because I think the perspective of that comes from like when you have like you can be so quick to blame everything devil. You know, something happens, it's the devil, when it's actually an aspect of you that was you. So there's also a flip perspective in terms of Gnosticism, in terms of being able to see God as the devil and the devil as man, because it's almost like your lower nature, like that is what you would class as if you would say like all the bad parts about yourself, that's what you would class as the devil, or that's what you those are the parts that you would kind of demonize in yourself. So that's what would be classed as like your lower self, and your higher self would be classed as everything that you know, what would be classed as God. But even this is where I differ, that I don't even like to call anything higher or lower. I just like to call it as it is, because I feel like there's an illusion of separation. Like there's nothing that's separate. Everything is together and cohesive, but there's almost like set laws and set dimensions of each polarity. But it doesn't mean to say that it is or it's light or dark, or it's good or bad. So we go on.
To add to what you're saying, Naomi, I remember, you know, when I was still kind of processing Christianity, that I got to a point looking at the God of the Bible that made me question that whole light, dark, positive, negative thing. You know, because I was like, the God of the Bible, they say he's good, right? You know, they say God is good all the time, God is good. But yet it created evil. This good God created evil. It gets jealous. It gets angry and kills people, drowns people. It repents. Yeah, there was a time when it, you know, the God said it repented of something it done. It's like, how on earth can you come to a conclusion that this God is entirely good when he does all this other stuff, but yet you would have a view of yourself, me speaking to myself, I would have a view of myself that I am bad because I am a mixture of both. How about everything is a mixture of both? We are all a mixture of both. Do you know what I'm saying? So some people are further along, maybe more inclined to call it higher, lower self, call it whatever you want, yin, yang, light, dark, whatever. Some are more predisposed to the lower parts of their nature, and some more aspire to the higher. But we're all somewhere along that spectrum. And, you know, as I said, I've worked with, you know, pastors and Christian ministers who were like supposed to be the holiest guys. And then I've been to prisons and worked with people who were supposed to be the lowest, the scumbags of the earth. Do you know what I'm saying? And I found in all of them a mixture of both. I found in the ones that were supposed to be really bad, you know, given conversation and a bit of time, you'll find that they're actually just normal people, just like you and us. They just made some bad decisions. And these you know, the bishops and pastors who are supposed to be so holy and whatever, put them in the right context and they stub their toe and they'll curse like any of us, you know what I'm saying? And they love money, or they got sexual desires just like everyone. Like this, it's a myth to say that, you know, some are good and some are bad. It's an absolute myth. We're all a mixture of both, and the God of the Bible is no different.
Cool. And my last one, because I know I've just seen someone here that says 4 participants, so I guess there's somebody else there. So my last question. So earlier you said something about, when I asked you about your belief system, you said about finding truths wherever they may come from, or wherever areas you get. So if you're faced in a position where you have what would be deemed as conflicting belief systems, for example, Islam versus Christianity, or something where there's a staunch difference, you can't be both, you have to be one or the other kind of thing, because one negates the other. How do you justify the validity of the truth from those? Do you look at it like, well, this truth is in this holy book and I believe that they were influenced or received some sort of, how do you kind of rectify that or justify that?
You only have to choose one of those, the two conflicts, if you have decided that those are the only two true, so I have to choose one or the other. Like I can look at any religion and find principles that are healthy within those religions, you know what I'm saying? But then I'll also, when I find bullshit, I'll call it bullshit. I'm not so respectful of the religion that, well, because there's some truth in it, I have to validate everything they do and co-sign everything that they believe. Nah, I'll take that and I say that, you know, for my own culture as well. A lot of my family are Rastafarian, and I find that a lot of healthy, great principles within that. But then I also find some stuff that's like, well, if that's what you choose to believe, run with that. But I find it to be absolutely nonsense. You know what I'm saying? That's just my opinion, and someone could hate me for that, but that's my opinion. If you can't verify it and you cannot evidence what you're saying, by and large, there's an amount in every religion of superstition, of culture that dictates people's behavior, and a system of control, and that's in every religion. Otherwise, there wouldn't need to be a particular religion that you sign up to. You just call yourself or whatever you are. Do you know what I'm saying? The fact that you have to sign up to something means there is a system that exists that you have to conform to. Do you know what I'm saying? And I don't see the need to conform to any system of belief, to any structure. So I'll just have conversations and take that which I find healthy and principles that I find healthy and apply those to my life. And those that I don't find healthy and I find unbelievable, unprovable, illogical, immoral, I'll say no thank you. And I heard a saying once that they said people that hate you for not having boundaries are normally people that profit from you not having boundaries. Sorry, people that hate you having boundaries are people that benefit from you not having boundaries. Does that make sense? And I feel like that principle is the same within religion. It's like if you appreciate my free will and nature, you know what I'm saying, to just grow and learn and become, you don't feel the need to have to try and force me to ripe. Do you know what I'm saying? Force me into believing something, or force me to. It's like, cool, you make your own decisions. If there is a God and if there is, you know, truth, you'll come to the knowledge of that anyway. If I'm saying I'm going on a journey to find truth, I don't see why anyone should have a problem with that. Just be clap, say, well done, go seek that truth. That's all I would encourage anyone to do. But yeah, I don't know if that makes sense to you, bro.
Adam, before you go, because obviously I knew that your I just have to know like your thoughts or of how you kind of saw this live, because this wasn't like a bash type live, but I think it's important, especially as you know, that just to get our stories on the record in a way that doesn't kind of seem you know, like it's just getting the truth out, because you know it's not a conversation that the church often likes to have, as you know. But I mean, what's your kind of perspective, just before you kind of leave, of just the conversation in itself, how you see like what's been mentioned today? Yeah.
I was going to say that no, I appreciate the conversation. I was actually going to say before I jumped off that as a Christian, I would like to apologize to you, Jahaziel, because I know firsthand what it's like when you come from with a different perspective. I quite like yourself, have always studied or wanted to learn. I don't care where the truth comes from. I just want to know the truth. That's my perspective. So although I still profess to be a Christian, that's the journey that I'm on. There's been many a time where I've had conversations with pastors and other people, and it's just ignorance at the end of the day. I feel that we've tied our belief system so personally to ourselves that when you question someone's belief system, it's as if you're questioning their livelihood, their existence. It's like you cuss their mum, all of the above kind of thing. So they kind of go, and unfortunately, especially within our culture, we like to take things too far. So bringing up basically telling people that they're not going to live to see such and such. I've had the same comments myself. People saying I'm going to die in my sleep. People saying I've got the mindset of an unbeliever. One person refused to believe that I had got baptized. It was just a whole bunch. So I understand. So my heart's there with it, but I appreciate the conversation. I think it's something that's definitely necessary, and I think it's something that needs to happen more often. If more people from whatever background you're coming from, if more people are willing to have conversation, that's where the truth will come from. We don't all start with 100% of the truth. We have a little bit and we build upon that, and we study and we ask questions, and from that we find more, and we find more, and we find more. So I'm all there for it. And Nams, you know me, man. Anytime you want to have an actual conversation in person, man, I'm all for it.
You know what? Let's actually, because I see you as like a bridge. I've always seen you as a little bridge, as a bridge between everyone. So let's actually, like, off this live, actually talk and see how we can actually move forward and create these conversations. I think it's better to do it digitally, because it's probably a conversation that would not happen in the church. But I think it's important, especially where a lot of people are leaving the church. The church needs to wake up and start having this conversation, because you're going to wake up and no one's going to be there. And that's not being said from like a negative perspective. This is just seeing the reality of what's going on right now, but no one really wants to acknowledge. So definitely, I'd love to facilitate some platforms where we can just all come together. I can do like a massive webinar on this, so we can do it privately, publicly, you know, maybe a mix of both. And definitely, that's my heart, just being able to just find a bridge of understanding, so that conflict isn't there anymore. It's not cool what happened to Jahaziel, and nothing like that shouldn't be okay. Do you know what I mean? If people could just be a little bit more open-minded. So thank you so much for that, Adam. I'll definitely hit you up after this. I'm just going to bring in the next... Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. I'll bring in the next person now. Margot. Bear with me, guys. She wanted to ask a question. Margot, you there? Margot? Can you hear? Margot? Margot? Hello? Can you hear?
Just giving us a tour.
Are you there? Can you hear? Hold on, let me try and unmute her. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear now. Yes, I'm sorry. I had my earphones off. I was talking to my son for a second. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, did you have a question for Jahaziel?
I don't know that anything specific. I was listening to see if I had any leeway to say anything, but I guess just really listening to his experience and how he had to transition and how everything flipped on him and whatever. How did it, I guess, make him stronger in who he is, I guess, and his journey, and how that molded him in who the man he is today, I guess I would ask.
Definitely. As is. So you're gonna say something, Jah?
Was that a question? I'm not sure.
Yes, it is a question. Like, how did the journey of what you experienced transitioning from a Christian to who you are now, how has that made you who you are today? How did that, I guess, maybe strengthen you or made you more so who you are today, I guess, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. But I guess, those experiences, that as difficult as they were, that's the reason why I don't regret them, is because they have helped me to find answers myself, like to not just buy into what I've been told. You know what I'm saying? And to not so much look for a God out there in the sky somewhere, but to look internally. And it's a very empowering process, because you stop putting the power in someone else or something else to answer your questions or resolve your problems, and it empowers you to take responsibility for yourself, and for both the good and the bad, or experiences that you might not like situations in your life that you might not be happy with. You take responsibility for those, rather than blaming the devil or blaming other people. And it's okay, what can I do differently? And so it's just a very kind of empowering journey, really, to if I am my own ship, how can I take control of my world and of my life. And I don't really know much more to say than that, really, as to how it's benefited. But yeah, I think also as well, just a peace, a peace that comes with thinking for yourself. Like, there's still tons of questions that I don't have answers to, but I don't have to pretend. I can be honest, about what I do and don't know. Whereas before, I would feel this obligation to have to give an answer to things that I didn't even understand. And I'd give answers based on what the Bible says. I'd give the prescriptive Christian answer, but that's don't mean that it made any sense to me. I still didn't understand it. You know what I'm saying? And now I'm at a place where I can just be honest. If someone asks me a question I don't know, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm not obligated to try and defend a whole religion or belief system. Share my thoughts and be honest. So just being honest has been very liberating as well. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
It did. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you so much, Margot. I'll speak to you a little bit later.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, Jah, do you have any last words that you'd like to kind of leave people with before we wrap up?
No, man. Well, if anything, just think. That's my word for everyone, man. Think. Like, it's faith doesn't have to be an absence of logic or reason. You know what I mean? Think. If you are part of a religion and you choose to be a part of a religion, that's entirely up to you, but it doesn't mean you have to swallow and believe everything you're told. Think. Like, you want to spiritualize it, call it discernment if you want. I don't know, but I'll just call it thinking. Like, just weigh things up. Like, does that make sense to me? Does that resonate in my spirit? Does that seem right to you? If they're saying, you know, just ask questions and think, and you know, don't just be satisfied because, well, that's what someone else says you should believe. Like, work out for yourself, you know.
Definitely. And even to that, I would say that's not just limited to Christianity. I would say that across the board, and this is bringing back the point of what I mentioned earlier about it's just the religious mindset in itself. That is the template that we sometimes apply to everything. So when you're filtering out truth, filter it out through everything. Whatever new ideology or belief or whatever you've been exposed to, whether it's old, whether it's new, whether it's current, like go through a process of filtering, and always filter it through the heart. The heart is the purest place within yourself. So if you always go back into your heart space and ask yourself, like, what is this, like, truth? I made a video yesterday or the day before on my YouTube channel talking about what does truth feel like to you? Truth has a vibration. It's a feeling, and it can always be felt in your two instinctive place, which is your heart chakra, and your solar plexus, your gut. That's why they say gut instinct. So always take yourself for a process of filtering whatever information it is, whether it's coming from a religious source, a conscious source, spiritual source, or whatever, because a lot of this stuff in this, a lot of the spiritual stuff that's being presented, a lot of the, you know, and even this, I'll put this here. There are some people that get stuck. Oh, Lisa, we'll bring you in as well. Let me just say this. There are some people that get stuck coming out of Christianity and get stuck at Kemet. And, you know, everything becomes Kemet. But it's like, okay, how does that benefit you? You know, you can't just go from calling Jesus to calling Haru. It's the same thing. Like, what does that mean directly to you? How can that directly benefit your life? So definitely yourself through the process of filtering. And I'm just going to bring Lisa in, and that will be our last question before we wrap up.
I can't see
Lisa,
anything.
can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I don't know if I can't. I can see you, and can everyone see me? Or I hope they don't.
Yeah, I've been trying to work out how to bring in your video. Hold on. Oh, that's why. Sorry. You should be. Huh?
Hold on.
Okay. There we go. Hi, Lisa.
Hold on, Lisa.
How are you?
I'm very well. You know, I love you both very much. So
Likewise.
How have you found the convo?
Fantastic. Just yes to everything. Yes, especially the last thing you said, because what I thought was interesting is that often people tend to just supplement the name Jesus for some new next thing, and it's actually your issues is still you're still very externalizing your belief system, and it's like you need a label. You need you know, you need a belief system. You need a community of people that are like you, that you can. And I don't know if it doesn't fix what's really going on, I found. So I'm trying to steer clear of labels. I'm trying to steer clear of, I mean, even though there are things I'll read, I'll find some very interesting things about, I found some really interesting stuff about Egyptology, very interesting about Yoruba spirituality and different things like that, but you won't catch me initiating into anything. Right. At least, because there's always going to be bits in it that where I think, no, that's not for me. No, that's not for me. And whereas before,
takes place in the temple of self. That's where the initiation.
That can change as well. You know, that I found there are things that at one point I'll be like, nah, I'm cool with that I've become more open to later on in my life. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's no obligation.
Whereas before, you had to be a fully paid up member to every single chapter verse. When I found that I got to a stage where I couldn't do that, And that was, I think, the last couple of years of me being in church was really hard. But the question I really wanted to ask you, particularly Jahaziel, was you at the beginning you were saying how you've had lots of different experiences of church, different expressions of church. And what would you say would be the one that would have, okay, the types of people that you know that leave Christianity, do they generally tend to come from one type of stream or from different? Because I found
that
people staying tend to be more from like a charismatic or a very Pentecostal or kind of, I found that the most people I know that are leaving or have questioned most are the ones that have become very theological and the ones that have actually started reading the Bible seriously. Because that's when you really begin to think, ooh, do I really believe that? Do you see what I'm saying? In my experience, the people I've found that have generally left or are kind of a bit iffy with Christianity tend to come from maybe like a more reformed or a more just they've moved from, yay, Jesus, name it and claim it, prosperity.
Grounded in the perspective of Christianity.
They've just become very, they've read a lot and they've become much more, they've probably divorced themselves more from the whole emotional side that kept them more at the beginning. Start actually reading and then they say, ooh, this doesn't resonate with me at all. This does not. From what I'm reading, it doesn't make sense. So they see the massive discrepancy between the God of the Old Testament, who's just up everybody he doesn't like, to fluffy God in the New Testament. It's like that's just one of the things. There's so much, and you just kind of think, okay, is it because people tend to be more? They study more, and they think. Then leave, or
think. They're encouraged to think. And that's what I said. They're encouraged to think. This is, we're getting back to the whole thing about thinking, and that's why a lot of people have that same experience coming from theology school. Do you know what I'm saying? A lot of people have been to theology school and have come out with less faith than they went in. Do you know what I'm saying?
That's funny, because when I first, it's so true, because when I first the church I used to like, because the church that I first got saved in was a Potter's House church, and in those days they were very theology, don't get involved in theology, don't ever go to seminary. Those people that do that, the disciples never went to seminary, etc., and they kind of really do down anything to do with actual deeper study of the Bible. And I mean, obviously I didn't leave from the Potter's House. Our church went through a change and then became something else, but there are quite a few streams of Christianity that are quite anti like theology or anti like deeper study of the Bible, because
because they know that once you start studying, that's your path to get out.
You start to see, it's like how can any of this you just start
it's
to
something
see
I've always heard myself, where and even I've heard in regards to Jahaziel, and I mentioned this to Jahaziel when we spoke about this previously, where it's like, because he's so in theology, he's so logically based, that's why he's gone off the rails. Of course you're going to go off the rails because you're not going to see the spiritual basis. Well, do you know what? This is where the flip side of the story comes in, because my journey was catalyst by a spiritual journey, and then I started studying.
Okay.
So there's people that come from both angles. There's I've met. I think it's also due to, it depends on the types of people that you're exposed to as well. I was exposed to more to a lot more kind of like spiritually based kind of people who were spiritual in Christianity.
Yeah. Okay.
Like speaking and all that kind of stuff. And they've come out and they've kind of like was able to adapt better to like that whole kind of spiritual shift in itself. But I think it's just, again, the common denominator that there is you being able to think for yourself.
Yeah.
Like kind of break the spell of actually I'm going to church, having this person read to me their not even only their interpretation, even their intonation. The intonation is important in itself. I mentioned this to you.
Authority speak, they speak with such you're so right. It's how it's down to how the seats are in the building. You've got this person at the front, the monologue, and there's this what we call a congregation when it's really an audience. And it is, like you were saying earlier, I remember probably about when I really started looking at actually the early church and the difference between how the early church worshipped and how Christians do it now. It's so different. For me, it was a bunch of things that brought me out of the whole situation. But I remember thinking, gosh, we just sat here like kind of, I don't know, lemmings. We're just sat in this building in rows, like we're in a classroom with this one person up on this podium. And it's just what you kind of buy into. And all of that just gets you, you're basically subliminally, unconsciously taking on this, I'm nothing, and the source of truth is there in front of you. In this book that the person's reading, the person who's reading it is supposed to be channeling that truth, and I just receive and accept it. And there's a lot that I think is very there's a lot that's actually very subliminal that keeps you in that state. I remember thinking, gosh, the early church, it was much more of a dialogue, and people would ask questions. Whereas the reality now is most meetings or public meetings aren't like that. And even when we did in the particular church I was in, I think most of the questioning that you would get was pretty closed in terms of, so what must we do to be saved? It was like a catechism, there's only one correct answer to the question.
Yes.
And so it's not really question and answer session. It's more ask a question and the answer has to be basically.
You have to agree with it.
Can I add something to that, Lisa? Is that I would find often I would ask questions and then the answer they'd give me would only invoke more questions anyway. Because, do you know what I'm saying? I'd be like, yeah, but that there's another 100 questions to ask off of that. And to be honest, for me, it wasn't really much deep. It wasn't like, you were talking about like studying and theology and stuff. It wasn't like some deep questions that led me to start thinking. It was very basic stuff. Like I remember watching Jerry Springer, and this woman was on there saying that she had a baby, but she was a virgin. She was pregnant, but the ghost made her pregnant.
She had an immaculate conception.
Well, but I was mocking it, but then I stopped and thought, what's different between her and Mary? Like, why would I laugh at her on Jerry Springer, but then say of this story of Mary that's true? If I put that in the context of today's world, it's ridiculous. If I put the context of, Abraham going to pick up a sword, God telling him to kill his firstborn son, if I put that into the context of today and I saw someone with a sword going to stab their child, I'm phoning social services. I want them locked up. I wouldn't say that person has some type of a faith that I admire. I would say the person's lunatic.
I think
of Christianity as well, because it's like sorry, what was the last thing you just said? I just lost my train of thought. There's something that you said that I wanted to say.
Me?
What was the last thing you just said, Jahaziel?
About just putting it into context. Those stories, putting them into today's context.
Yes, that's the thing. The problem outrageous. With the spell of Christianity is the literalness of it. It cannot make sense in a literal context. None of it can make sense in a literal context. It can only make sense in a metaphysical, metaphorical context, and that's the only way that I can choose to read the Bible today. I can only read it from that perspective. If I read it in a literal perspective, I'll literally send myself going crazy, because it creates all these questions, and this is where we was demonized in the fact that when you ask the question, it became almost reversed on you, that there was something wrong with you as to why you can't have that question answered.
Gaslighting.
Yeah, narcissistic behavior.
Yeah.
So,
what you were just saying, Jahaziel, when you were just talking about the Abraham situation, if that happened today, you'd say, yeah, this is a social services situation, or you'd say, you know, the thing about the Jerry Spring woman. But one of the things for me, yeah, I mean, obviously there was the study aspect that helped to open my eyes to stuff, but it was also, as you were talking about just now. So like, I remember I don't know if you remember a few years ago, that thing that was taking place in Nigeria, where there were like 200 odd girls that were just carried off the village and just taken away and, you know, made into sex slaves and raped and stuff. So we know obviously that happened in the Bible, and that's what actually the God of the Bible endorsed that. In fact,
endorsed it, absolutely.
Do it.
Take the virgins for yourself.
Yeah. About the time when the Boko Haram situation was happening, and there was that hashtag "Bring Back Our Girls," and you know there was this uproar about it, and I just remember thinking, these times I was still a Christian, yeah, leading worship, you know, still very much, you know, just trying to hold on, you know, but this thing was happening, and there was this wrestling going on inside me, saying, "Well, that's what Israel was told to do."
Exactly.
Go into a whole village and just, you know, once you've conquered the village, just take the women you want, and the girls who aren't married, they can just be your slaves.
Even worse, they didn't even they take the women, take the virgins.
Yeah.
Only the virgins.
Yeah, and it was
How
like,
barbaric is that?
It just bugged me quite a lot, and I found that and the thing about the Syrian situation where there was this genocide in Syria, I just remember thinking, gosh.
Hezekiah himself, there's a scripture where it says that he went to the Hamites, I believe it was, which is Africans, and God told him to go and kill the whole nation. In the Bible, it says that they were peaceful and that they were there from days of ancient. They didn't trouble no one. They weren't doing anything, but God told Hezekiah to go and kill that whole nation.
Yes.
And even if you compare the statistics of the amount of people God has killed in the Bible as opposed to Satan.
Yes.
There's no comparison.
God is responsible for something like 2.5 million murders in the Bible.
Wow.
Satan probably, I think, about 5, I think.
Yeah.
So this is the problem where they've given this human characteristic to God. Like when I read the characteristics of God, that to me, that sounds like a really like emotionally unstable human being who you know, is easily triggered when people don't do what he wants them to do, and you know is ready to go and like almost like Trump, like press a button and be like nuclear war, like when someone just does something that he doesn't agree with. And to me that's quite that's dangerous, because if you're saying that this is not the loving father that I was taught to believe, and this is the cognitive dissonance that comes in. I can't make that work. And in fact,
there comes a time when it can no longer work with you.
Yeah.
Sorry?
There comes a time when it can no longer work, and that's the internal the wrestling that we have. Or I say in my case had, it's gone now. But I found that when you were saying about this cognitive dissonance, most of us, what we tend to do is we bury ourselves even further into our works and the things that we're supposed to do as Christians to just try and dull that and dampen that feeling. And that's what I think I did for many years. I would say probably about 10 of my 20 years. So all while I was singing, singing out and stuff, I would say for about 10 of those years, I was probably trying to dampen a lot of the questions, and that's what I think most people have to do, because we live in the information age. There's no excuse for anyone to be ignorant about anything. And you're just forced to question eventually.
Do you know something else that I find a coping mechanism that a lot of people do, Lisa, is only focus on the elements that they like. On the characteristics of this Bible God that are attractive. So the verses that look nice and are about love and stuff, like we'll focus on those. The stuff about him endorsing rape, genocide, mass murder, slavery. We'll just ignore those verses. And so you won't hear those verses taught in church. You won't hear them preached about in church. You won't hear anyone speak about them. Do you know what I'm saying? It's just, we just pretend that doesn't exist, and he's just a big fluffy teddy bear.
Like the incest.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it works, especially if the kind of preaching that you're used to tends to gravitate around that stuff. The empowerment stuff, the stuff where you're basically using the Bible, like you're using verses from the Bible almost like mantras, and it's building you up. It's creating a sense of protection around yourself. It's
absolutely.
I can understand how it works.
Absolutely.
Then you're attracting prosperity. You're attracting.
Absolutely.
It's the principles are all still there. It's just
absolutely.
But when we do it,
and they're banging principles.
Demonically possessed, or
the principles. This is the beauty of it, is that these principles are they're not owned by a religion. They're universal laws that can be used and appropriated by anybody. You don't have to sign up to any system of religion. That none of them own these principles. Like you just said, mantras, positive confession, meditation. These are all things that we are all free to do, and you don't have to have any God or savior to do them. Practice them yourself, and they work. Healing.
Yeah, I think if anyone would say what is my religion, it'd probably be universal law.
Come on now.
That's the principle that is the same theme in every religion. You'll find the same principles. The principles is just it. You sow, you reap.
Why? Yeah. Sorry. Carry on. Sorry. Carry on.
Sorry. I lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
That's okay.
No, you're correct. It is a universal law, and which is why we were discouraged from studying comparative theology or syncretism, because obviously you then begin to see the similarities, and then you think, it's not just us then. It's not
exclusive. We're not exclusive. Exactly.
I remember being discouraged from looking at other religions.
That was important as well, because I think that's what actually broke my paradigm, was that when I came from a very and I'm grateful for my Christian background in terms of the last church that I went to. I was going to Ruach, and I was grateful for Ruach because I was grateful. I was there for a few years. But I was grateful for my transition to Ruach from the type of old school church that I was going to, simply because they were bringing in more theology. I was even introduced to numerology through that. I was introduced to like the Hebrew, the Greek. I was understanding how to decode scripture. And I guess that became like my foundation for being able to go deeper into metaphysics and even Gnosticism and stuff like that, and be able to understand the different kind of perspectives of like just being able to decode all of that in itself. So yeah, that was my foundation. I can't remember my point. What did I say before this again? Sorry.
You just said that you appreciated your background with, like, as far as Ruach. I'm not sure why.
What did I say before that? I was meaning to something. I can't remember.
You're talking about different religions and all the different things from different religions that actually lead to the same universal law. Yeah.
So I came from Ruach. So if anyone knows, Ruach is a very charismatic church. You're seeing healing, you're seeing prophecy, you're seeing tongues, you're seeing all of the gifts of the Spirit in manifestation at once. You see it every Sunday. You can't deny it. So I had that experience, but when I started to actually look into stuff like Reiki, and that being a Buddhist healing modality, it's exactly the same thing as what Christians should be doing when they're laying hands. Yeah. And I was like, I remember coming into that first comparison, and I felt I felt so bad with myself, with how as a Christian, how I judged every other religion, because I didn't realize that we was actually believing the same thing, tapping into the same thing, but in this argument about what to define it as.
Yeah, it's got to be if it's not the word, if it's not Jesus or Holy Spirit or God, then it's the devil.
And they always have to weave your, no, but is it Jesus? Do you believe in Jesus?
Yeah, I don't know what that's.
No, it's very real. But no, this has been like a really awesome conversation, and I'm grateful for you even coming on, Lisa. It's refreshing to even speak to you, because I haven't really spoken to you. You've gone through your whole journey yourself. But it's really beautiful to see. But so I'm just going to kind of wrap up from now. And I just want to say thank you, Jahaziel, for just being so open, just being so free in your in the reveal of your own truth to the masses. And yeah, like, I just want to thank everyone who's been able to join us in this discussion. I can see that there's some little mini debates going on in the chat section. I'm just going to leave that wherever that is. But I'm just hoping that everyone can take what they need to take from this live. Take what resonates with you, and, you know, as they say, take the meat, leave the bones. You don't always have to go after the messenger, but there is meat in every message, and it's for you to be able to seek and take that in itself. So thanks again. If you need any information about what it is that I do in regards to anything with regards to self-healing, my natal charts that I do, and being able to help people to understand their inner dimensions, how you react, how and why you react the way you do, and how to be able to move in a state of transformation by understanding all of your influencing elements. So I can take you through that process. I do intuitive oracle therapy, counseling. So being able to infuse intuition in your therapy, which is something I feel like is a massive lack in counseling today, which doesn't allow people to kind of move forward, because you're expecting someone to almost see that and bring it to the surface rather than bring it forth yourself. So I understand that. So if you need or would require any of those services, you can go ahead to my website, www.soul-reconnection.com. We do have another live on Monday with Kaisha, and this is going to be about perfectionism. So that's going to be real, and I'm sure a lot of people will be able to resonate with that. So I just thank you guys again for joining in on this conversation, and yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Thank you.
Peace.
Take care. Bye.